Life magazine published this image in August 1955. The idea was to tell people that the new disposable products had arrived to simplify the lives of housewives who would no longer have to bother washing dishes and glasses, as the family could simply eat and then throw them in the trash where they would cause no problem. The modernity of plastic had arrived to simplify people's lives, and with it, the era of disposable products. Recently, I've been reflecting on that Life magazine image and the comforting falsehoods it presents. We've extended the idea of disposability beyond just tableware. Consider many recent superhero films. Don't you feel that several of them are meant to be watched once, make money for the studios, and then be forgotten? Don't you ever watch a movie, enjoy it, and then 2 weeks later you can't remember it? It happens to me with several, but what makes these movies feel like this? Honestly, I've thought about it a lot and I think I know the answer. So, taking advantage of the fact that I'm not yet tired of recording, I wanted to record a different video for you. One where I want to give you a more direct opinion. Because yes, the truth is that I'm fed up with disposable superhero movies. We have all used a disposable plate or cup for various reasons at some point. But this concept of buying things to then throw them away is something relatively new. That is, in the past, even things that we consider of little value today, like a sheet of paper, were precious goods because they cost more money or were harder to get. Above all, people were not used to the concept of buying something just to throw it away after a single use. But this began to change in the 50s when many plastic producers, seeing that their products lasted a long time, began to implement this idea that the modern thing was to throw things away and buy them again. A consumption system requires people to constantly consume. So through marketing, they began to change people's way of thinking to normalize this new concept of disposable products. How accustomed are we to the idea that throwing things away is normal? Significantly and uniquely for each person. For example, it still seems strange to me that there are people who wash disposable dishes. However, my in-laws give me odd looks when I hand them the marker to write their names on the disposable cups. They seem to have the idea that I do it to save money rather than to avoid creating more waste. This also applies in many other areas. For example, nowadays we are used to clothes not lasting as long, and many people even feel that they have to keep up with the latest model of X cell phone, even though the old one still works perfectly fine. The concept of disposability extends beyond plates and cups, making me wonder how accustomed we are to superhero movies being disposable. The first thing to do is understand that when the first superhero stories began, they were completely targeted towards children. This idea is still closely tied to superheroes, especially for those who have never read a comic book. This one you see here is the first comic I read. It's called The Final Night, and it tells you about how Hal Jordan, who was then known as the villain Parallax, sacrifices himself to reignite our sun. And I remember that comic at that time blew my mind, because until then I thought superheroes were things for kids. Very simple stories where the heroes were always good, the villains were always bad, and distinguishing them really wasn't difficult. But that story showed me the complete opposite. Here I learned that the legendary Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, after the destruction of his city, was consumed by grief, guilt, and power. So he became a villain who tried to change the flow of time to be able to save those who are no longer here. The comic was borrowed, not mine, and I had to return it. But years later I found this same issue at the bazaar, and of course I had to buy it. This comic made me view superheroes differently. This comic changed my life. However, most people weren't lucky enough to have read The Final Night. For them, superheroes remained characters from children's stories, or those that simply looked good on products like lunchboxes or Happy Meal boxes, which constantly underestimates these types of stories because people have the idea that children's movies don't need to be good, it's enough that they make you laugh a few times. This trend of disposable movies is also common in films targeted at children. On one hand, we have films like Home that become moderate successes and make you smile, but you probably don't even remember it anymore. And on the other hand, we have films that become modern classics like Frozen due to the quality of the story and its ability to stand the test of time. I would love to tell you that only the good movies, those that seem to have heart and that survive the test of time, are the ones that became big box office hits, but that's not the case. There are many movies from Disney's soulless remakes to my favorite villain 15 and Ice Age 22 that were big commercial successes at their time despite losing relevance over the years. Because this really doesn't matter much to the companies. They prefer to release a product that they know will work following a certain formula because it will make them money immediately. Something similar happened with superhero stories. They got used to the Marvel formula working and they repeated it over and over again, even with characters that were not from Marvel. That's why I think the phrase that has done the most damage to superhero movies is, "It's popcorn. It doesn't pretend anything.
You have a good time."
And I remember hearing this phrase many times around 2016 when Batman v Superman was released, as many people hated the tone and execution of this film. I like the movie but understand the criticisms since it feels disorganized and pretentious with many underdeveloped concepts. People rejected it, wanting simple and entertaining superhero movies instead. Over the next few years, we saw many movies that delivered exactly that. Simple and entertaining stories whose reviews regularly said, "It's popcorn. It doesn't pretend anything.
You have a good time."
The stories were effective, moving the plot forward smoothly, providing humor, changes, and references. For years, we've watched these movies because there was no reason to change. The films generated good box office through a formula that, when applied correctly, gave very good results. But honestly, after all this time, I'm tired of this formula. I prefer watching a flawed but daring movie with a unique identity over another formulaic film that works but feels mass-produced. Those whose reviews say it's popcorn, it doesn't pretend to be anything.
You have a good time.
I think that's why I hated the Aquaman movie at the time. I know it's an unpopular opinion. It's not that it doesn't work. I think it's a good movie. It just seemed to me the sign that from now on, both Marvel and DC were completely committed to continue using a formula that was working for them, which did happen with many other productions. The Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man trilogy exemplifies successful movies that work well, surprise audiences, and fill movie theaters. But did you really feel them as a satisfying experience a couple of weeks after watching them? Spider-Man is among the most fascinating Marvel series, with multiple films demonstrating the wall crawler's ability to deliver compelling narratives. John Watts, the director of this trilogy, is like a beige shoe, unremarkable and bland. He's a glass of lukewarm water. He is the personification of how they must have sex in Finland. That's precisely why he's a director who has worked so well for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's a director who sticks to the budget and formula provided by the company, delivering the bare minimum on time and in form to please shareholders and sell tickets. There are many very good directors who have gone through the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but there are really very few who manage to adapt their own style to the formula that is already established. Because, let there be no doubt, the formula comes first and the style comes after. These movies seem disposable as they are made using the same formulaic approach. When we talk about something being prefabricated, we mean it's built in the quickest, most efficient, and economical way possible. In other words, it reduces time and costs, allowing for higher production. In the case of superhero movies, the so-called Marvel formula seems to work like an assembly line where the writers place certain elements like a protagonist, a problem, a villain with a somewhat understandable motivation, changes and nods to the movies that will come later. This approach works but eventually feels soulless as it makes many movies provide a very similar experience. In this case, it's not a matter of budget because these movies cost a fortune, but it is done with the purpose of releasing as many movies as possible in a short span of time in order to generate quick money. And well, that's lame, isn't it? It's important to note that not all news is bad, as many Marvel and DC productions ventured beyond the formula and presented proposals that truly contributed something more. To mention a few, I think productions like the Batman, Guardians of the Galaxy, Vol. 3 and Into the Spider-Verse bring something very interesting to superhero cinema, while I can also say the same about series like WandaVision, one that initially completely strayed from the formula, and I loved it because it felt like something different than usual, an exploration of a Marvel character's psyche through real pop culture series. I find it to be Marvel's most intriguing product in years.
Although, well,
I hated the final episode, but because it precisely seems like they threw away everything they had built. They reverted to their old ways. Luckily, I believe the box office and critical reception of recent superhero movies have caught the attention of film studios. For example, at Warner, James Gunn filmed the Superman movie well in advance to give the computer-generated imagery artists time to work well on the film and has been promoting this policy that quality comes first. At least that's the discourse they've been handling. Let's hope it's true. While Marvel Studios has also given more space to its projects, and today surprised me with a Thunderbolts poster that I love precisely because it moves away from what we regularly see, that is, floating bodies and heads. The Marvel Cinematic Universe introduces something new, but will the movie deliver? I don't know, but at least the trailer and the poster make me feel a bit more optimistic. Perhaps I'm already in an abusive relationship with superhero films. I also began watching the Agatha All Along series this week. Honestly, I thought I'd be disappointed, but I was pleasantly surprised by the first 2 episodes. Because it has a vibe very similar to the beginning of WandaVision, because there's a background mystery, and even the humor is well handled. Because aren't you also a little tired of the excessive humor? As fans, I believe we deserve better products, and we must remember that the best way to assert our power as consumers is through sales, at the box office. In the same way that the marketing of the 50s convinced several generations of people that it is completely normal to buy things to throw them away after a single use, I feel that another type of marketing has convinced us that certain types of movies, like animated children's or superhero movies, simply exist to entertain us. And that's it. The reality is that all these types of movies have a lot more to offer. What's important, I believe, is not to settle for less. It's important to emphasize that not all movies need to be deep and thoughtful. There should also be simple and entertaining movies. But this does not mean that a product is disposable. Rather, what I would like is for each movie to have its intention, its reason, and its own discourse. I think we as viewers do notice a difference. And fortunately, there are many movies, stories, and superhero series that show us that this is true.